Alright folks, so welcome back to the Mosin channel. It is D-Day, the 79th anniversary of D-Day, 10:30 at night. I probably should have recorded this earlier, but there was a lovely little ceremony local where we had 4 of the veterans of D-Day, men that had survived. 2 had survived Utah Beach, 1 had survived Omaha. Actually, 2 had survived Omaha, 1 survived Utah, and 1 was on Juneau. Very interesting fellows, and we had a little ceremony for them, thanking them for their service. So I haven't had a chance to make this video until tonight, and behind me you can see a nice little relic of D-Day that is actually a Beachmasters uniform shirt. I may or may not actually make a video centering exactly around that one. I cannot for the life of me remember which sector he landed in. And I should be ashamed of that. I know I have the documentation somewhere kicking around my house, but it's been 7 or 8 years since I last even thought of that shirt, and frankly, I've forgotten which sector it came from. But we're going to look at other parts of the collection tonight, because as you guys know, I am a World War II junkie. There's another neat one. That is a Russian uniform shirt with a medal for the defense of Stalingrad on there, and also a medal for victory over Germany. Both original, by the way. The first thing we're going to, well, the third thing, fifth thing we're going to look at today is a nice little bandage here. Well, you can't really make out the words because my webcam still sucks. You might be able to make out the date 1139. This is actually a relic of the early war, when Germany was still, or when the Allies were still kind of futzing around and trying to appease Germany. Very interesting pieces. They produce these bandages by the thousands, and it is basically, it's essentially duct tape that they use to wrap it. It's canvas on the outside with an adhesive, sticky adhesive on the inside that keeps this secured, and it is actually very similar in composition to duct tape. Probably in reverse, but you know, there's that. That's just a neat little thing to look at. And since we have Germany out, we might as well look at, this is a letter. It's a letter my grandfather recovered from a German soldier to his beloved Merla in 1944. Neat little relic there. It talks about a whole bunch of things. Specifically, the most interesting mention is the promise of reinforcements, which never came, of course. Yeah, new divisions are coming soon. They have promised us. The divisions never made it. By the time that this letter would have officially, or would have probably reached back to Berlin, it probably would have been hand-delivered by the man that wrote it. Their division, he was with the 7th Army, and they got pushed back and obliterated, basically, in Russia, and anyone that was coming to their aid basically stayed in Germany, and got obliterated in Selah Heights. Yeah, that was a messy little part of the conflict, but yeah, that was just an interesting little letter. It has a whole bunch of personal notes in there. How are the kids doing? You know, things like that. It's just a nice little relic showing that, yes, the Germans were human too. And we'll stick with Germany and look at something I got off eBay a while ago. This is actually a set of prisoner of war release forms for a man named Willy Kreuger. And you can see the name there. He was an auto mechanic, apparently. And it has all the home address and everything. It's got his signature. And basically this comes from the provisional government of Germany that the United States set up. And it's got his registration card too. There's a whole bunch of documents in there, and it would be a pain in the ass to go through them all, but you can see some of them in the military government, his official discharge paperwork, when he was officially discharged from, I believe he was Luftwaffe. Yeah, he was officially discharged from the Luftwaffe. Very neat little thing. He's Westphalian, or he was Westphalian. I'm not sure if he's still alive. I have to assume he wasn't, or he isn't. He wouldn't be in my possession. Yeah, for those of you that don't know, Westphalia was a very large part of Germany. It was the political center of Germany for a long while before Prussia took over. It really didn't have a whole lot that stuck out about it. It wasn't an artistic thing. It was a political capital, basically. It was part of one of the principalities that eventually formed Germany. A very large portion of it comes from Westphalia. But as I said, there's nothing really that stuck out about it, apart from the size. Like Bavaria has beer and food. Prussia has legendary military generals. Westphalia really didn't have much of anything. I think they had some mercenaries back in the in the 1700s, the 18th century. So that really didn't help anybody, though. Well, it helped America. And it helped the British during the Revolutionary War and the War of 1812. But that's not the point. We have a nice little piece here from the Eastern Front. This is actually propaganda that the Russians wrote. Yeah. You can see this picture of what looks like German soldiers reading a newspaper. All three of those were actually NKVD agents. Probably the interns that were forced to pose for the day as part of their internship. And then you have this nice little message down here, which essentially reads, "Surrender to the Russians. They treat us really well. We can send mail to our families. They're liberating the workers." Standard Communist Party line. And it's signed by four names that are just basically, let's look at some of these. Fritz Gunkel, Friedrich Gallenbach, Josef Kostek, and Edmund Ribiska. Edmund Ribiska. Yeah, that sounds Romanian to me. I'm sorry. Josef Kostek was probably that might be a German name. Fritz Gunkel, probably. Friedrich Gallenbach, that's also probably a German name, but no. I can pretty well tell you that this is a line of horse shit from the NKVD, but you can see they've got a nice little, what looks like a handwritten version back here, and this text down here in Russian essentially says, "Take this person prisoner and deliver them to the NKVD for interrogation." Yeah. You were not going to get to read a newspaper. You were not going to get to send a letter home. You were going to get to sit in a chair and have the crap beaten out of you, be electrocuted, burned, stabbed, all until you finally gave them the information they wanted, and then if they were feeling nice, they'd shoot you in the head. If they weren't feeling nice, they would just feed you to the wolves while you were still alive. So there's that. Speaking of Russia, this one isn't technically World War II. This is actually Cold War, but we have a medical kit, which you can see there. Medical and suicide kit, because two of these are doses of cyanide. So if you were an officer, you would be carrying one of these, and if you were captured, you would bite down on the side. You'd put the cyanide capsule in your mouth and bite down, and that would be the end of you. It meant you didn't have to deal with torture and interrogations, but it also meant that you didn't live to find out that America generally didn't torture generally didn't torture you when they interrogated you. They pretty much just threw you in a cell until you were ready to talk. At least they didn't officially torture you. We're not going to pursue that line of conversation because that will probably get me interrogated. Got some interesting pieces here. These actually are syringes, glass syringes. Can't remember which one is open. Give me 2 seconds here, and I'll figure it out. This is not the open one, I don't think. Or is it? No, this is the one that's been closed all these years. Okay, then this is the one that we can open, and I can actually show it to you. Yeah, this is the one. Oof. These are actual German military syringes. You can see they're made of glass, glass with steel. The syringe itself was actually meant to be reused, and you would fit it with a hypodermic needle that came out of one of these little tins. Would fit on the end there. You'll notice a lot of this is in English. That's because these were originally designed to be used as commercial products, but when the war broke out and the United States decided that they had had enough of Germany's shit, Germany was left with a lot of commercial grade hypodermic needles and syringes, and they said, oh, well, okay, if we're not going to be able to sell them, we might as well use them for our military. And that's what they did. These were used by the Wehrmacht. This specific set was in storage in Romania, I believe, or Bulgaria. A German storage, just a German storage depot that got raided by the Russians, and some of them got brought home. Very interesting. And you'll see a symbol there that was used much later on by the Russians. Let's see, it's right by my index finger. The triangle one, yeah, first quality. That's the actual translation of it. That's why the DDR used that for their proof mark, basically, for rifles and whatnot. It actually meant first quality, and in theory there should be some that have a triangle with a 2 in them, that means second quality, and a triangle with a 3, that means basically throw this crap out. Never seen any of the triangle 2 or 3s, but ostensibly they should be out there. Before we continue on to Russia and Japan and America, or Russia and Japan, let's finish up with America here. Got a bubblegum card. Now, there's a neat story behind this. It says Daring Sub saves Corregidor's gold. Now, Corregidor was an island in the middle of the Philippines. It was called the Rock. It was basically an island fortress, if you will, in the middle of Manila Bay. And it had, I can't think of the exact number of people on there, but basically it was considered to be an easy, cushy job during the war. Unfortunately, when the Japanese attacked, they overran Corregidor, and that led directly to the Bataan Death March and several other things that should never have been. There's actually a fantastic book, the name of which I cannot remember, by a gentleman named Brigadier General Steve Melnick, and I'm going to post that down in the description below, the link to find a copy of that, because that is a fantastic book about the occupation of Corregidor and the fall of that island. I have a signed copy around here somewhere. It's really just a spectacular read, and if you're interested at all in World War II, you should definitely read it. Oh wow, I kind of forgot about these. Another thing before we leave Russia, we have some pay books. This one is the Komsomol, the Communist Youth. This young man was 17, I believe, or 16, and he was an artillery officer and was killed in battle. And yeah, this one kind of got picked up from there. This one belonged to just a Communist Party ID. I believe it was a replacement book because it's not very well, or very bright and shiny, if you will. They have some little badges in here that look very suspiciously similar to a guard's badge and the Order of the Red Banner, but Yeah, it's basically just be a good communist, etc., etc. This one is a dues book, basically. It shows that you paid your dues for the month to the party and how much you paid. 100 rubles. That's pricey as hell. Basically, dues to the party were like your taxes of the time. You'd pay a substantial amount of your income to the party in exchange for not being shot. Uh, Basically, taxes. That's how they work nowadays, too. That's surprising. I thought we would have changed, but no, we haven't. This one comes from a neat little ship called the USS Minneapolis. Now, I have honestly forgotten the history of the USS Minneapolis, but this is one of their ship schedules from 1942, Sunday, February 22nd, 1942. They were out at sea. The ship survived by not being anywhere near Pearl Harbor. And the neat part about this schedule, not only does it tell you what they were doing the entire time during the day, such as at sunrise, secure from dawn phase, set regular wartime cruising condition, watch, light ship. Half hour after sunset, dump garbage. 1600 to 1700 band concert on main deck, weather permitting. You know, just neat stuff like that. It's also got the following message is again promulgated for information of personnel who did not see the memorandum disseminated on Saturday morning. I congratulate all hands on their excellent performance in our first brush with the enemy, and particularly comment the fine discipline that avoided in general firing at our own planes. Opinion on this ship is that 18 enemy bombers attacked yesterday afternoon, that 16 are known to have been destroyed, and a possible 17th. So, yeah, basically they ran into Japanese bombers. They were, as far as I can tell, they were heading towards Honolulu. So they were somewhere around probably halfway between the Philippines and Honolulu, because it says that they will be docking in Honolulu in 4 days. So I'm assuming they're about halfway. So that means that the Japanese did attempt an attack on this task force wherever they were headed to. And 17 out of 18 bombers were shot down, which is a spectacular record for that day. And also, got a neat little thing on the back here. How to use morphine syrettes. I'm sure some of you are out there taking notes right now. But, yeah, they have a nice little detail about how the syrette was actually supposed to be used. Probably not the most useful thing in the world nowadays, but still, it's just pretty neat to see that they were actually they actually had to remind folks how to use these things. And then since we're near Japan anyway, we got some military sake cups. Now, this lotus pattern here is the source of a lot of myths. A lot of people say that it means that this cup belonged to a kamikaze, and there's really no evidence to support that theory whatsoever. In fact, the most likely explanation is that this was just added for the commercial market to make them more palatable, I guess. You can see it's done over a nice little design in there with the rising sun and everything. There's a beautiful little design in there, and then they just kind of airbrushed lotuses over it, because why the hell not? That's the only cup I have that has that on there. I personally don't like it, but either way, it's a piece of history, much as any other. This one is an unblemished military one. I don't read Japanese, so I'm going to have to leave the translation of that up to y'all. If you feel so inclined, you can post what it says in the comments. I realize it's a bit difficult to read. There we go. Could probably get a decent screen capture of that. But yeah, each one of these was purchased for the soldier by their family. They're hand-painted, handmade. It was very important to the soldiers to have these, because This little style like this, or like this little guy, this would have been your daily drinking glass. You would have just basically sat there and shot after shot. Um, the more important ones were the larger ones like this, and we'll have a size comparison. You can see the difference here. This guy's basically one shot. This guy's basically a fifth. Yeah. And the larger cups were ceremonial. Basically, they would have little ceremonies of cleansing and whatnot, and you can see they've got another little engraving there. And most of the time, those were just dedications from the family. Sometimes they would have inspirational messages like come home victorious, or fight for the emperor, or you are honored, etc., etc. Things like that, just little details. It's much like you would have gotten from your family if you had just gone off to war and they wanted to send you an inspirational message. And we have one that's actually even bigger. This is the previous one, and this is the bigger brother. And yeah, they're right next to each other. You can hear them clinking, so you can tell it's not a trick of perspective there. This guy is actually pretty dang huge. It's a folded rising sun banner. Supposedly there's some way or some whole mythology behind the different types of, or the different ways that the banner is folded, but I've never honestly seen documentation that hints at any of that, so I'm just going to leave that to the folks that know more about these cups than I do to conjecture about. For me, it's just a neat looking flag with a nice little dedication in the middle there. Again, these were ceremonial. You'd have, like, I don't know, a cleansing ceremony or a wedding or some such thing. You'd want to have a bigger cup for, whatever that might be. And we also, well, since we're in Japan, this guy should be recognizable to most all of you. Japanese Type 30 bayonet. Now, as you can probably tell, this one has seen many better days. This one comes out of an excavation. I'm not going to really discuss that part too much. But anyway, basically the idea behind these was, this was much less of a practical thing than it was a psychological thing for the Japanese, because at the time, the only people that could carry swords were nobles or samurai. And when they received a bayonet like this, and they looked at it, and it has the traditional, basically, the look of a katana to it, this was huge to them. It made them feel like they were someone that was incredibly important. The emperor was with them, what have you. It was a huge psychological morale boost to them. Unfortunately, it was also used in battle. That was a very, very poor choice on the Japanese part. By the way, this bayonet was used on everything from carbines all the way up to light machine guns, and there's actually the Type 99 light machine gun, which is a modification of the ZB-26 that's been mated with a... It's hard to even think about it. It was a Type 96 mated with a Hotchkiss, and it is bad news. It really was. It had one of these mounted on the front of it because, you're going to... They apparently pictured that somehow you would grab the hot gas tube assembly or something, that you would just put your hand on there and stab the shit out of someone with this, and that just deeply amuses me. Anyway, this was mostly designed to be psychological. It was not an effective tool of war, no matter how long and how razor sharp it was. By the time that these were put into practice, the bayonet charge was really falling out of favor. The Russians still used it heavily, but that's just because they had the manpower to support those kind of casualties. You could throw an entire Russian penal battalion at one single German machine gun. only manage to kill that one machine gun, and you'd still come out ahead with Russian numbers. With Japan, they did not have the numbers to support that, and they definitely did not have the resources to keep pouring into replacing these things. So, and you can see this one is a straight quillion. Early in the war, it would have been hooked, and later in the war, they did away with the blood gutter. They did away with they kept the straight quillion. They used a bamboo sheath. They just started cobbling them together out of whatever they had left because they just kept losing too many of these. And you can also see that with the Type 99 rifles. And they call them last ditch, but in reality, the Type 99 that we know and love as the last ditch went into production long before 1945. Japan was using those since 1941 approximately because they just did not have the sheer resources to churn out the higher quality early Type 99s. Of course, the wooden butt plates came in much later, but if you look at the older Type 99s, you just see a gradual simplification and cheapening of the materials and processes used. And to crown this all off, we've got one of my favorite pieces. It's a trench lighter. It is trench art, and for those of you that don't know, trench art just means you grabbed whatever you had in the trench and you made an artistic piece out of it. And in this case, it was a functional piece. It was a lighter made out of an 8mm Mauser cartridge with the bullet pulled off of a 9mm Luger round, and a a flint and striker from a German field lighter or trench lighter. The Russians really produced these in large numbers because lighters were considered to be a luxury item. So you basically had to provide your own when you went into the field, even though you got a daily ration of Makorka tobacco. And also, yeah, the bottom is just a hex bolt that was probably salvaged from a burnt vehicle or something. And it has a nice little Leningrad looking stamp on there. Just a neat little piece, and yes, it does actually throw sparks. You can see when it feels like it. There you go. It would probably light, but I don't have any fuel in there. And what they did, they took an 8mm Mauser round. They just take the bolt out a second here. They drilled out the primer pocket and they tapped it. And they took this bolt broken off from wherever they found it, and they screwed it in there. And then whoever had the welder that day welded on this little striker and flint, and they welded a little cap on the top there, and you can't really see it that well, but it's just a little disc that got welded onto the top, and they put a shoelace through it to they put a little length of shoelace through there as a fuse or a wick, and they made a trench lighter, and the 9mm bullet fits over the top, as you can see, as just a way of snuffing out the flame and keeping it dry and all that stuff. It's just a neat little piece. The Russians did a lot of stuff like this. The Germans did it sometimes too, but theirs were more letter openers, and Americans did a lot of letter openers. Germans did a lot of cigar and cigarette trays, and so did the U.S. I've seen some German tea kettles, actually, that were made out of artillery shells, which were pretty neat. But yeah, I think that about wraps up what I feel like showing tonight. Like I said, there's a whole bunch more around here. I've got a whole lot more in the collection, but unfortunately I don't have the time to take it down off the walls and talk about it. And there's a lot of stuff that's actually out in museums. The Audie Murphy Museum has a lot of my stuff in there. So we're not actually going to have time to go through all of those, but just remember, today is the 79th anniversary of D-Day, the single costliest battle in U.S. history. Make sure if you've got a veteran in your town to go shake their hand and say thank you, because, well, you've seen some of the artifacts tonight, and you can pretty well imagine that some of the folks that were using them did not die a pretty death. Debating, I think I will make another video soon with some of the helmets I have from Kurland and Kursk and a number of other locations where they were found on the scenes of battlefields that had taken place, or battles that had taken place 70 years ago, and you can see bullet holes through them and shrapnel wounds, and one actually has the entire right side of the helmet was taken off by an artillery round, so that meant that the guy had a hole roughly like that carved into his head by an artillery piece. But yeah, they're not exactly the most savory articles in the world, the most savory artifacts, I should say, but they do tell a story, and I think I will eventually put some of those up here. But until then, this is Sergey signing out.